Good evening. Welcome to Simple Healthy Life, where our goal is to have insightful, real discussions on topics that we find interesting. And today, MJ, I was hoping that we'd talk about what I call, or what is called in the literature, interoception versus exteroception. It is an interesting topic because, and for simplicity purposes, I'll refer to this as inward focus versus outward focus. And it's quite a simple idea, but its applications go far and wide, I believe. And the idea is that with inward focus, we have the ability to come inward and put our attention, put our focus onto thoughts, feelings, emotions, internal cues such as hunger, fullness cues. And with outward focus, we have the ability to bring that focus attention outside of the body into our senses. So that could be visual, it could be auditory, it could be smells, it could be touch. And what they find, and this is really what I find interesting about the topic, is that people who tend to be more inward focused, like their brain orients to a more inward focused, in a more inward focused way, they tend to have higher stress levels, higher anxiety levels. They tend to be more reactionary. And specifically when we're talking, or when I'm talking with people who have some sort of eating disorder or disordered type of eating, they demonstrate that, well, the people who are more interoceptive, more inward focused, have higher sensations of hunger, more improved sensations of fullness, but along with that comes the stress and anxiety. So I know we've kind of riffed on the topic before, but what are your thoughts on that, just in general?
Great explanation. Thank you. You know, what came to mind, as silly as it sounds, was ignorance is bliss. And I think about, we can only bring our awareness to one thing at a time. And whether we want it to be true or not, we're blind to everything else for at least that moment. Right? Our body can sense all the different things, but our mind can only do one thing at a time. We can only do it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So if you're outwardly focused, you're not worried about how you feel. You're not noticing how you feel. Then in some ways, you may not even be feeling good, but you're ignorant to it for that period of time. So in some ways, ignorance is bliss. I guess is kind of what I thought of right away.
Yeah.
But I guess you threw me off for a second because I didn't think about the topic as if that people didn't have a choice. And the way you explained it was, naturally. You're naturally more inward or naturally more outward focused. And I never thought about it that way. So I guess I would throw it back to you. Like, does it mean it's natural, or do you grow into it being more inward or outward? Can you change from growing inward or like being more what's the word?
Inward focus.
Inward focused, interoceptive,
Yep.
to like more. Maybe you want to pay more attention to the present moment, or does it just simply come down to like the default network, and your default mode network is working more?
Right. Yeah, so simple answer to that is yes, we can change it. And I kind of, the way I understand it is your brain has an inclination or orientation to be more inward versus outward, or vice versa. And so take, for example, and I think this demonstrates the point, but take, for example, someone who has social anxiety, right? This is like a symptom of being very inward focused. So you're talking with someone, I'm talking with you, and vice versa. And if you're talking and all I'm thinking about is how I feel, how uncomfortable I am, what I'm going to say next, what kind of feelings, whatever you say, elicit within me, then yeah, I am a lot more inward focused. And you can see how that can be such a detriment to real connection because I'm not actually giving you the attention you deserve. And in some ways, being interoceptive, being more inward focused, is a little selfish, and it's kind of tough to say it that way, but or harsh rather, but it is, and there are some, obviously there are benefits to that. Someone who is more inward focused has a better connection to their emotions, thoughts, feelings. Where, to your point about like ignorance is bliss, if you are ignorant to the thoughts, feelings, emotions, hunger cues even that are happening within you, that spurs its own issues. I was talking with someone the other day, and this person I believe to be fairly outward focused, just naturally, like that's their natural orientation. And they were saying, well, Ryan, I don't really have too many emotions. Like I'm a pretty chill person. Like I just go about my day and blah, 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 blah. But then they're also talking about, I have binge eating. I go home and I'm all stressed and I binge eat, which is, by the way, primarily afflicted upon people who have more of this like outwardly focused orientation.
Really? Is that because they don't notice?
Right. They have just a disconnect from hunger, fullness cues, so binge eating comes a little bit more natural to them, or they're more inclined to do so. But yeah, that person just having very little comprehension, very little focus, very little connection to what's going on inside them, it's still manifesting in behaviors, it's still manifesting in actions, despite the fact that they think that it's not there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, this topic, I'm glad we brought it up because we were just talking earlier about what is it, they call it the cognitive triangle. Your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. Mm-hmm. And what is so interesting about that is we know that they all drive each other. So we think, right, your thoughts drive your feeling, which drive your actions. But we know that that's not necessarily true, right? You act sometimes impulsively, no thought, and then react. Right. You acted, now you feel a certain way about your action, and then your thoughts come back. Right. So just an interesting connection to whether or not you're like inwardly focused or outwardly focused. I would argue being outwardly focused is safer. You're more aware of of what's happening around you. But the ability to be outwardly focused and then reflective, and taking that, okay, this is what happened over the course of X amount of time. What happened there? How do I feel about it? How does that make me feel? Instead of maybe so focused on it in the moment, how you feel.
Right. Yeah, I think you had asked, can this change for someone, right? And the answer is yeah, that can change. So you can strive to be very balanced between like an inward focus and an outward focus kind of idea, I suppose. One thing that I share with clients is that specifically those who have difficulties eating or may be more inward focused, I share with them, well, maybe try some very mindful eating. And I know that that's come up on our podcast a number of times, but mindful eating is embracing a very outwardly focused activity. And the more that you engage in that kind of deliberate focus outside of the body, the more outward focused you become. And if for someone who really is like highly inward focused, then that's going to help balance them out a bit. And not only just by the sheer act of them taking their attention outward, but it does help restructure the brain with that neuroplasticity to do it more often, more regular, and make it more natural to them. So that is one way that you can kind of orient yourself more outward just in general.
So what would be a good, we talked about this a little bit, so what would be a good way to practice that? And you mentioned mindful eating, but like, is there a meditation style or is there like a reflection style? What would be a good way to practice becoming more of an outwardly focused person?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, the simple thing is that one, we could try mindful eating, right? Like that is one example, and so when I share with people, hey, please try this, that is one way to orient the brain more outwardly. The other way is we can do a little candle meditation. So a lot of us have heard of meditations, but we tend to go right to the deep breathing, focus on thoughts, feelings, emotions, kind of interoceptive meditations, which are good, right? It's nice to build that connection inwardly and to anchor to your breath and all of this. But for someone who might be already very inwardly focused, those might not help as much as they think or as someone might suggest. So candle meditation, light a candle, put it in front of you for 5-10 minutes, and just always redirect focus back to the candle. And it's kind of nice because there is something intrinsically pleasing about fire to us. It's just like, wow, fire, right? It's like you ever sit around
Definitely.
a campfire and everyone's just staring at it, right? It's because it's so captivating to us for good reason. But that is the one way that I like to do that. I suppose you could do meditations on any object, right? You could look at a tree. You could have a very mindful conversation such as this. But for me, it's easy enough to light a candle, set a timer, 5-10 minutes, and just continuously orient my focus there. And over time, you're going to start to see the benefits of that. And specifically when I'm feeling very in my head, right? Everyone's kind of experienced this, where it's like thoughts are going crazy. It's because your brain in that moment is very inward. Like the thoughts feel very loud. It's because that's where the attention is. So one way I use to pull myself out of my head is just candle meditation, 5-10 minutes. Easy enough.
I love that. Yeah. What is it they say? Where the attention goes, energy flows. Right. So you're purposefully bringing your attention out of your head, out, whatever way you want to do it. And I love the candle. I think I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
I haven't really experienced that type of meditation before, but I can see the benefit, especially for, shouldn't say especially, but right now I can see the benefit for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And, I guess contrary to that, if someone is feeling disconnected from their thoughts, feelings, emotions, their hunger cues, their internal sensations, then these like really interoceptive meditations can be really helpful for them, right? Tune into the breathing, right? Tune into that and pay attention for 5-10 minutes. It doesn't have to be crazy long. We could also do that with hunger. You had said the other day, maybe not the other day, because I tend to use the other day very sparingly, as someone pointed out, the other day.
How many days ago is that? Just out of curiosity.
I think
previous day before now, not today.
I don't know. To me, the other day covers years.
Yeah, exactly. It really is just the other day. Whatever day it was, the other one.
Yeah. So the other day you had brought up about people really feeling their hunger cues and about kind of like fasting and maybe sitting with that hunger a bit, which I do think is good practice for certain individuals, but that's a good way to practice a little bit more inward interoceptive capability. It's just by focusing on the hunger, right? What does that feel like? And I like to bring in a lot of like nutrition and dietetics background here, but there are different types of hunger, and you would only know that if you were, I guess, paying attention to those different types, or someone had brought them to your attention. And so, for an example, we have this kind of like need for protein hunger, which is very stomachy, right? Every time I bring up what does hunger feel like, people say, "Oh, it's a stomach growling kind of thing." I'm like, yeah, that is hunger, absolutely. But that's the one that everyone goes to, and that to me is a need for protein. So that stomachy feeling is from the hunger hormone ghrelin. We've talked about that before, and that's emitted in the gut, and it's emitted in the gut from the gut when there's no protein available. There's no amino acids, and so it comes out and says, "Hey, I'm hungry, and this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a protein." The other types of hunger are a little bit more subtle, but I know that you're familiar with this. You ever feel like loss of focus, tired, sluggish? You may not be hungry, but you're just like, I just don't have the mental energy.
For sure.
Right. Yeah, that's glucose. That's your brain's running low on glucose, needing some sort of carbohydrate energy. So that is a hunger cue. You don't necessarily have to be stomachy to eat, right? That's not an allowance all the time to eat, because there's this need for glucose that doesn't produce that stomachy kind of feeling. This morning, I woke up and out of the blue, the stomachy feeling was super heavy for me. I was energetically very, very on par, I would say, but I had this massive stomachy hunger kind of pain going on. And to me, okay, that's protein. Well, what did I do the other day? Oh, I went strength training for the first time in a little while, and I kind of fell off my routine and went back, and so lines up there, right? Needing more protein. The other one, the other hunger cue, I guess, is this like need for sustenance, this like craving for food. You're not necessarily tired, you're not necessarily hungry, but there's like this craving that you can't necessarily place. And I know we've talked a little bit about that, especially with your nighttime ice cream escapades, I think it was.
That's very true.
But that is a need for fat, right? Just this need for a very sustenant kind of food. And so right there, 3 different types of hunger, but you can only really understand that if you have put in some amount of work and built up that like interoceptive capability around hunger, right?
I think that's really well described. I have one more question for you, though.
Sure.
What about the one where you're full, but you're so used to eating on the couch before bed that you just do it anyway?
Yeah, that's behavioral.
Okay, all right, that's fine. That's fair, very fair. We'll address that another day. I think.
Yeah.
I've been better.
Good. But yeah, so I mean, building up those, whatever you're lacking and whatever your typical brain orientation is. If you find yourself being very anxious a lot of the time, you probably are heavy inwardly focused, heavy interoceptive. And so doing more exteroceptive, more outwardly focused practices, such as the candle meditation, such as mindful eating, such as really mindful conversations, connections with people, is gonna help you out. They've done research on this. They know that this reduces stress levels in most people, including those who struggle with eating disorders of all kinds, anorexia, binge eating, bulimia. So trying to balance out, and if someone is more outwardly focused, they're feeling disconnected from their emotions, they're not necessarily able to really exude emotion or share emotion or connect to that in any way, then yeah, doing more of these more interoceptive, this inwardly focused meditations is helpful, or maybe just connecting a little deeper to hunger, or connecting a little deeper to what the thoughts that are going on in your mind are like, right? Like putting some awareness to them is good. Ignorance is not always bliss.
No. So let's kind of balance it out then. Like when I think about where do you want to be, right? You want to be back and forth. Do you want to be in your own head and then out and then external? That's probably the way it goes, right? Your default mode versus your task positive comes back. But when I think about choosing to meditate as a way to fix, quote unquote, right? Or not fix is the wrong word, or just move from inwardly focused to outwardly focused. Isn't it interesting that when you really hone in on the present moment, if you do a meditation to just understand what the present moment is for you right now, it does include internal and external things.
Sure.
You can feel the way your body is feeling the floor. You can hear my voice. You can pay attention to the feeling that maybe my voice is getting, right? Whatever that is, right? And you can, so it's both, right? The present moment is made up of both, the inside and the outside.
Definitely.
So, yeah, present moment meditation would probably be like a nice way to balance your yourself out?
Well, here's the interesting thing. It depends where you are in the present moment, and they also know this about like this interoceptive versus exteroceptive is that if you're in an airport, something very stimulating, it's going to be pretty hard for you to come inward because everything's pulling you out. If you're in a nightclub, are you having bad thoughts in a nightclub, or you worrying about what your mom said at the dinner table at a nightclub? I mean, probably not,
Right.
because there's the sensory experience. Remember, that's what outward focus is. It's sensory experience. It's pulling you out.
Right.
It's pulling you out. So in that case, it's actually very helpful, regardless of your typical orientation, to be inward. Practice being able to pay attention to those inward thoughts, those inward feelings, while in a very stimulating environment. And conversely, neither of us were talking, this would be a very low stimulating kind of environment, at least from my subjective
Definitely.
opinion.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
And so,
Compared to the airport, for sure.
right. And so if I were to, just solely pay attention on what you're saying, then that's practicing kind of like the contrary experience there, and to me that is super helpful.
I love it. I think step one is noticing.
Mm-hmm.
And then now that you've done such a good job of describing it, I think that it'll be easier to notice, right? Maybe we all go through life. Maybe I'll ask the audience, or if you're listening, the question like, which one do you spend most of your time doing? Right? Where are you mostly? When you said binge eating, it put me in one category and one category only. So, but I consider myself pretty, introspective. I do spend a lot of time in reflection, but I do appreciate and would prefer to be outwardly, especially when I'm around people that I enjoy. I want to really take in the good that they bring to me, right, and not be just standing next to them.
Yeah. You might have days where, one day is you're in your head, and other days where you're just kind of disconnected. And so, paying attention and being intentional about how you go about your day, depending on what the feelings are going on in there, I think is really helpful. But yeah, I like it. So identify where you're more inclined to throw your attention. Are you more inclined to think about whatever you just said when you're talking with someone and be anxious about that, or you're more inclined to maybe pay too little attention to what you just said, right? And then kind of developing a regimen centered around that. You don't have to do candle meditations every day, but just as I do, maybe a candle meditation when you're feeling kind of in your head is going to be a helpful thing, and kind of orient yourself outward and reduce some of that anxiety that comes with being more inwardly focused.
All right, Rye. Thanks for bringing the topic today. These are the reasons that we do these podcasts, right? I love to discuss this stuff with you, and this one, I think, really hit home with me. So thank you. Could you maybe give a quick recap for everybody, on the whole thing?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we've got interoceptive or inward focus capabilities, and we've got exteroceptive outward focus capabilities, and it's kind of like we're in a balancing act between the two of them. And some people are more inclined to be inward focused, some people are more inclined to be outward focused, but identifying which category you fall into and doing activities or just being mindful over how your brain orients. Trying some candle meditations if you're more inward focused is one good example, or do some mindful eating. Or if you are typically more outward focused, disconnected from thoughts, feelings, emotions, then maybe doing some inward work, like doing some breath work, meditations would be helpful for you. But yeah, we for Simple Healthy Life, we are on Spotify and YouTube and all of the places that have audio files. So we will see you next time.